Hi everybody, welcome to You're Not Dumb, 7 Stages Explains It All. I am Caroline Hufftail and I am the Marketing Director here at 7 Stages. And today we are talking to Jessyca Holland, who is the Executive Director of C4 Atlanta. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Today we are talking about the role of art and artists and gentrification here in our city specifically. C4 works with artists to make sure they can have professional careers and helps them with development. Can you talk a little bit more about what else you guys do for art and artists?
Sure. You pretty much got it. We do workforce and professional practice and professional development for artists. We serve through in-person training about 400 artists a year, and then through all of our programs combined about 1,200 artists a year in the city and the metro area of Atlanta. Some of the other things that we do are just connecting artists to resources. We act as a clearinghouse for information, and then we also have an advocacy group that pays attention to and monitors issues that may be affecting the livelihoods of artists in our city.
So that brings us into our next production, which is Sea of Comic Catastrophe. It is being presented through Art Spot Productions, and we are starting that show February 2nd for previews, and we'll open on February 3rd, running until the following weekend. Sea of Comic Catastrophe looks at how Katrina specifically affected the neighborhoods in New Orleans and how that the water caused the upheaval as well as the aftermath in those neighborhoods of gentrification, displacement. And so with the show coming here that focuses on Katrina and what happened in New Orleans, we want to look at what's happening currently here in our own city, specifically with art and artists and that issue. And so my first question would be, art is used a lot to revitalize neighborhoods, to change the landscape, to get people interested in new places, specifically downtown especially. Why do you think that's the first step in this process?
That's a good question. There's a couple of things going on. I think when looking at how art can help revitalize a community. So let's, from the artist side, you're looking at opportunity, and artists often earn less than their peers with the same amount of education. So they're really looking at moving in or opening up a gallery or a theater or some other type of art space where they can afford it, right? So you have that happening, and the second piece of it is really this idea of placemaking. And so this is sometimes used as a tool by developers or cities or other entities to help create a common sense of place. And art does that really well. If you think about the murals that we have in Atlanta, or even looking at like a larger mural project in the city of Philadelphia, those were used to encourage civic pride and also give people a sense of ownership of their neighborhoods. I would say that there are other things that may be at play before art even arrives in the neighborhood, but we often see it because it's so visible. And usually when you're talking about murals or sculptures or things like that, that's the first thing people recognize.
In terms of the language used to talk about the art that's coming into the neighborhoods, the effect that it has on the neighborhoods, you often hear beautification, revitalization. How can we choose better language to talk about a place that people have lived a very long time and we're probably very happy there, instead of making it sound like it was bad before and now it's better?
Right. I mean, some of those words can be coded, and we know that in the city and other cities. And they have a little bit of a colonial feel to them, right? Like, I discovered this neighborhood and I'm going to help them, and I think that that's where we need to start taking a step back as artists. It's not to say that the intent is bad. It's to really kind of peel back the layers and really understand what is at the heart of that intent. And when you use words like beautify and revitalize, you're really taking away agency from the people who've lived there, as you mentioned, for a long time. And so I think that it really starts with working with community and not to or for community. And as artists, we have this opportunity to really create vocabulary that the community identifies, right? So I can't come in and say, this is a new vocabulary that we're all gonna share together. What I would wanna do as an artist is be a part of that community, I think is the first step, but also listen. And listen to the vocabulary that people have, the words that they're using to describe their community, and think about it from an asset-based development as opposed to let's focus on deficit in the community.
What are some examples of how art has already made either a positive or a negative impact here in our city?
I think it's never a one or the other. I think with great things that are happening, we also can run into problems or issues that we have to tackle as we move along. But I think that, because I work downtown and because I work with a lot of artists that are in that the South Downtown region, I look at what's happening there from an organic perspective, that you have one group opening up a gallery, kind of music venue, and then other people saying, hey, we all want to be around each other, so let's open up these spaces. The flip side of that is that it does attract developers. And so what we're seeing is artists downtown sort of grappling with these questions of, are we going to be now displaced economically? I don't know about specific examples right now, but this idea of displacement, there's two types, right? There's the economic displacement, like I can no longer afford to be here or pay the rent or pay the property taxes, right? And people deal with that. But there's also cultural displacement. And I think that a lot of the artists who also are living in South Downtown or working in South Downtown are also kind of looking inward and saying, how do we continue to create art and continue to do what it is that we love, but also be a part of the community and not be this sort of agent of displacement culturally or economically.
What practices can artists begin now to make sure that they are making the correct impact on the places where they are bringing their art or want to bring their art?
Yeah, I think the simple answer is really going back to that idea of intention and really asking yourself some hard questions and thinking about your relationship to the community with which you're working, and I know the phrase check your privilege is thrown out a lot today, but I think it is really important to check your privilege as an artist and kind of get rid of this idea of I'm here to save or I'm here to help. Within our organization, we've tried to get rid of the word empower. We don't give power to anybody. We don't have that right. What we try to do is think about listening and amplifying voices as an organization, and I think artists have the opportunity to do the same thing. And community organizing, looking to community organizers, cultural organizers, looking to see what they've done and understanding methodology behind that. And also going back to the community development, this idea of asset-based community development. There's so much out there that's written about that, from looking at a place of who are the people here who have tremendous assets and talents to offer, and how do we work with those human beings and not take away from their work, but then avoiding the sort of deficit mentality, that a building is an amazing asset, right? And space is an amazing asset. And looking at it as something that can leverage identity and leverage a sense of place is one way to start thinking about that. And also, I think just listening to people, and understanding, doing more research. And if you feel uncomfortable asking the questions, just go to Google, and Google it in and look at the different examples that are not only here in our city, but all over the United States of people doing some amazing community-based artwork that comes from a place of equity, inclusion, and diversity.
I really liked what you said about taking the word empower out of the conversation and not taking on the role of giving someone permission to do something. They have their own access to that. Can you talk about what C4 does to give artists those resources?
Sure. Yeah, and that was a struggle for us, really thinking about this word empower, because I think it was a part of our marketing. We're empowering artists. And then we turned that around on us and said, okay, how do we take that out of our lexicon as an organization? And when we started working on Hatch, which is a program we developed over a year ago, it's a multi-month training intensive for artists who are interested in working in community-based art. A lot of the content that we brought to Hatch really challenged us as an organization to think about our place in community, and our community being artists. How do we speak to artists and not from a place of authority or even condescension, and Hatch, because so much of it is about working with community. We brought in people to help us develop the content who did cultural organizing, community organizing. We had a city planner help us develop it. And so it was really all of those pieces in putting together this program that really, while we were putting together the program, learned, from the program itself. And so there was a kind of education and building process that happened. And it's always evolving, right? I mean, vocabulary is hard, and sometimes you have to unlearn it, to be open to learning more about this type of work.
Great. Thank you so much for being here, Jessyca.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
And thank you all for tuning in to the first episode of You're Not Dumb, 7 Stages Explains It All. It's an ongoing series that we're doing to make sure that you can go out into your communities and get involved, have deeper conversations, and we'll see you next time here at 7 Stages.